Today I have the privilege of interviewing Dr. Alexander Sulakvelidze. Sandro, as he's known as, is the chief scientist at Antibiotics, a private company located in Baltimore, Maryland, and is one of the foremost authorities on bacteriophages and infectious diseases. Sandro, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure, Greg.
Let me start off by asking if you can give us a quick background in layman's terms on how bacteriophage therapy works, how it addresses the growing problem of antibiotic resistance, and some of the potential applications.
Certainly. First of all, what are bacteriophages? And those are viruses, but they're good viruses. They are arguably the oldest and most ubiquitous organism on this planet. 3.5 billion years old, perhaps, and 10 to the 30, 10 to the 32 power particles on Earth. So they're everywhere. They're in your mouth, in your skin, in your GI tract, in the unprocessed fresh foods that you eat, the water that you drink. So literally we live in the sea of bacteriophages. Now, even though they are one of the oldest organisms, they were only discovered in the early 20th century. And they were discovered to have a phenomenal antimicrobial activity against selected strains of bacteria and bacteria only. They cannot infect anything else. They cannot infect human cells or plants or mammals or anything else, just bacteria and a specific bacteria only. So what that means, though, that they could be used to specifically target bacteria that could potentially be harmful for humans. Now, think about early 20s when they were discovered, and the formal discovery dates are actually 2 dates because they were discovered by 2 people independently, 1915, 1917. Those are the years where antibiotics do not exist and infectious diseases are essentially untreatable. So when bacteriophages were discovered, there was a lot of enthusiasm. Finally a cure for infectious diseases was found. And they were used almost immediately after their discovery to treat human infections. And the first clinical trial, if you will, or first therapeutic use was to treat bacterial dysentery. Now, there's a long history. I won't get into all the details. There are several reviews and books published today about how they were discovered, how they work. But what that makes them very relevant and important in the current day medical practice is basically one major thing. They kill bacteria, yes, and so do antibiotics. But bacteriophages kill bacteria using a very different mechanisms than do antibiotics. And correspondingly, the mechanisms by which bacteria develop resistance against bacteriophages and against antibiotics are very different. And so what that means in practical terms, that when you have a bacteria that is no longer curable or treatable or killed by any currently available antibiotics, bacteriophages can still kill it. And that is a fundamental issue of importance. The emerging trend in antimicrobial resistance. It's really one of the most alarming, if not the most alarming development in the current medicine, because it really has the potential to change the way the medicine is practiced today if we are no longer able to treat bacterial infections. And so bacteriophages offer us a very attractive complement or alternative to antibiotics for managing those drug-resistant bacteria. So that's what triggered an increased interest in phage therapy recently.
Antibiotics has prioritized veterinary food safety and environmental applications for bacteriophage technology. Is this because the opportunities are greater in those areas, or is it due to concerns about the ability to defend the patents of naturally occurring bacteriophage compounds when they're used in human therapeutic applications?
It's actually a little bit of both, but the main reason is not that. When the company was formed, and remember, we are one of the oldest companies involved in this field. The Antibiotics was formed back in 1998. And so those are the years where not a single phage preparation is approved by the FDA or USDA or EPA. So basically it's a novel field. And so the company made a corporate decision that it would be simpler to get people acquainted with this technology, the regulatory agencies, scientists, public, if we were to go it through the agricultural route first before getting into human therapy applications. I think that concept is still valid after now 15 years or so since that time or more, and so that was the main reason. Now, having said that, we are currently expanding into other areas of applications. So, just to give you a brief overview, the potential applications for bacteriophages are very broad. On the most simplistic level, if you have a bacterial species or a few limited number of bacterial species, and that's important because bacteriophages have a very specific target range. They are very different from antibiotics that kill everything. They will only kill, bacteriophages will only kill a certain strains or subgroup of strains within the species or closely related species. And so with that platform technology in mind, theoretically, bacteriophages can be used in almost any setting when a specific bacterium is a problem, ranging from food safety to human therapeutics, and you can toss in multiple other applications like cleaning surfaces, oral care, skin care, different cosmetic applications, and so on, and probiotic applications, which is becoming more and more important with bacteriophages. So on that wide range of potential applications, we started with agricultural by improving safety of foods. We were the first company in the world to receive FDA approval for bacteriophage-based product to treat foods. And we currently have 3 different products on the market. That is the largest number of approved products on the market for any company in the world. And so now, of course, we are beginning to expand into other areas, including probiotics, skincare, and then hopefully as a subsequent step, we'll also explore human therapeutic applications.
Okay, thank you for that. What are some of the ways companies can enhance their patents to prevent a competitor from changing 1 or 2 components of, say, a phage cocktail and circumventing the patent protection?
The simplest way is to engineer phage. And there are companies that are actually doing that. They're engineering phage in any imaginable way. Some of those engineering efforts make absolutely no sense to me personally. Some of them are intriguing scientifically. From a practical standpoint, it remains to be seen where that will go. There is not a single approved product, engineered approved product, as far as I know, on the market yet. But clearly, if you engineer something, then you can patent it. Now, taking a step back, there is sometimes a misconception that you have to engineer phage because you cannot patent a natural phage. And even though that issue is controversial, today you can patent natural phage. Intralidis has several patents in which we patented natural phages and their application. So it is patentable. So there is really no need to genetically engineer them from a patenting standpoint. Now, the strengths of that patent is a different issue because I can patent my phage, and all protection it gives me is preventing somebody from reverse engineering my commercial product. But they are free to go isolate other phages and use those phages to develop new products. So this type of a patent protection is somewhat limited. Now, we were lucky enough or bright enough, or you picked the name, but we managed to get 2 patents that I think put us in a very different position compared to any other company in this field. We were able to patent the use of phage for changing colonization, either in GI tract, mouth, skin, you name it. The distinction is very subtle. Now, the phages are used to treat human infections. That is called a phage therapy approach. And phage therapy approach has been used since 1919. And so, really, you cannot patent that. This whole platform has been too late. And so, what we were able to patent is not a therapeutic approach, but a kind of a prophylactic approach when we use bacteriophages to eliminate or reduce the levels of specific bacteria in the GI tract or skin or mouse or in other ecosystem before it triggers infection and disease. So, and we were able to get 2 patents, one for this application in humans and one in agriculturally important and other animals. So the implications are very significant. Just to give you 2 ideas. The one implication is in the probiotic field. Think about microbiome. There is an increasing number of studies focused on microbiome, an increased number of studies linking specific microbiome composition with various infectious and non-infectious diseases, like certain microbiome obesity, certain microbiome, certain forms of cancer, and so forth. So, and that information is growing. So people are clearly getting involved in this, and this is becoming more and more important. Now, what phages give you in that big picture is the ability, perhaps for the first time ever, to go into that microbiome and subtly change it. There's nothing else that allows you to do it. Vaccines don't do it. Antibiotics don't do it because they have such a broad spectrum of activity. With phages, you can go, say, in the GI tract and eliminate or take out one of the specific bacteria and leave the normal microbiome intact. The implications are mind-boggling. So you can potentially have a tool of modulating, engineering microbiome and generating some associated health benefits. So that's kind of a probiotic approach where bacteriophages could be used for infectious and non-infectious diseases that are associated with gut microflora, could be used for some developing oral care products that basically, against gingivitis or dental caries, could potentially be used to improve resilience of skin and so forth. And so the other aspect of this is that you can also have impact on directly on disease. And so a good example is a vancomycin-resistant enterococci. It's relatively benign bacterium. It's not very pathogenic. Many people have enterococci in their GI tract. They bind. The problem begins when somebody gets into ICU or hospital and his or her immune status is immunocompromised, knocked down. Let's say cancer chemotherapy or organ transplantation. And what happens at that point that the VRE that's in the GI tract gets into blood, and then you can't treat it because it's so resistant to antibiotic, and that kills the person. And so the implications, it's almost ironic if it wasn't so sad, because you could have a phenomenally successful, sophisticated organ transplantation surgery went exceedingly well, and the patient will die simply because that little bacterium that easily could be treated just a few years ago, now it kills him. To detour a little bit, this is actually how Intralytics was founded, and I'll tell you that if you're interested. But getting back to the concept, by using phages not to treat VRE infections, because that would be a classical phage therapy, what we have patented is using phages to go and get rid of that VRE before patients undergoes cancer chemotherapy or organ transplantation. So we are reducing risk of that patient becoming bacteremic and dying from VRE. And that type of application is also patented. So there are all kinds of ways people can patent it. To summarize, starting from direct phages or applications or genetically engineering them. And some people are patenting not phages necessarily, but some of the products of phage production, like license, for example, are also fairly heavily investigated these days. And so there are a number of avenues that different people pursue, and God knows what else somebody else will think of. I am a big believer in people's talent, so I'm sure there are lots of talented people out there that will be coming up with ideas that I really have no clue today. Okay.
Okay, thank you. You recently attended the NIH Phage conference in Bethesda, Maryland. Were there any new research findings announced there that caught your eye? Any particular companies whose presentations impressed you and who you'd recommend that investors keep an eye on?
There are several companies that are out there, and I think the more word gets out there, more and more people and companies beginning to get involved. Now, Intralytics is, again, a little bit of bragging, but we are one of the oldest companies, and we are the first company with approved product, and the company with the most approved product on the market. And so I think if investors should be looking at somebody, they should be looking at Intralytics first and foremost. Now, after this,
well, first you have to provide them a way to invest in the company. Right now, it's entirely private. So,
it is private
what about
company.
some other options that you think investors might want to keep an eye on in the meantime until there's an option of actually participating in the growth of Intralytics?
Private companies, including Intralytics, do have venues to accept investment funding. It's a little bit more complicated than just going to E-Trade or Scottrade and buying some stock. So it's not as straightforward, but it's doable for accredited investors. So that's something that can be done. Now there are, I think, one or two public companies now that are involved in the phage therapy field. Some of them, but they're exploring a little different options. So I think one of them is looking into basically not actually using bacteriophages, but using enzymes that are produced by bacteriophages to rupture bacteria. That seems to be working primarily against gram-positive bacteria. It's an intriguing technology, I think, coming out of the Rockefeller University and Vince Fischetti's lab. And so that's something that has been developed by one company that is, I think, public. It's an intriguing technology. I think it.
Are you referring to Contrafect there?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay.
And it's an intriguing technology. It has some limitations, and everything does. And it probably has a niche of applications, as bacteriophages do. So, for example, I personally don't see the enzyme technology as a success in the food safety business, for example. But I could see it being potentially useful in, say, dental applications. If you have an enzyme that targets dental, gingivitis-causing bacteria in the mouth and so forth, and potentially for human therapeutic applications. So I think personally it's a viable option. It will take more time and efforts to get something like that to the market, which is a good example. They've been at it, not necessarily the whole company, but the concept's been around for, a couple decades now, and we still don't have a single product on the market. So it's a good technology, just going to take some time. And it may not work in all aspects, but it has some value in others, in my opinion. So there are other companies that are pursuing phage applications, say, for treating wounds or lung infections. There's one public company that has had some very mixed reviews, including business reviews coming in lately. I'm being a little cautious because I'm not convinced or how well they'll perform, given all the fundraising they've already accomplished and how little they have to show for that fundraising. So, it's.
So let me guess, you're talking about Amplify Biosciences?
Yes, I am.
I thought so. Okay.
Yeah, and the company's been obviously very successful in raising significant amount of cash, a very significant. And as far as I know, as of today, they have very little to show for it. But I'm hoping that they have more in works, and eventually I'd like them to succeed. I'd like several companies to succeed in this field. I think one company or two or three companies are really not enough to bring this technology to market. So clearly I'd like to see more and more. So there will be some failures in the history over the last 20 years. There have been several companies that were formed to pursue phage therapy. Most of them are out of business by now. And so I think the same thing will happen in the future. There will be more companies here and there, but at the end of the day, I'd like to see several companies succeed.
Yeah, I guess Amplify will need to find a chief science officer first if they want to have any chance of success down the road.
Clearly, having a chief scientist is a very important, if not critical, component of any company intelligently, so I probably shouldn't be talking. But there have been recent personnel changes. The CEO left and was replaced. The CSO just left, just maybe a week or two ago. I mean, I don't know exactly the timing, but fairly recently. So those are not good signals. But I hope that they can turn the things around, and I do want them to succeed, because we need several success stories in order to convince medical community that this is something worth pursuing.
Were there any research findings that were kind of groundbreaking? Anything that was a little bit revolutionary or new that was announced at that conference?
Not really revolutionary yet, but I like the way synthetic genomics, for example, was developing things. It's a company out of San Diego, and they are pursuing a synthetic approach of making actually bacteriophage. Now, and the technology is very intriguing. Scientifically, it's very exciting. I mean, basically, it's almost you can almost envision that you can synthesize anything further down the road. So they started with bacteriophages. Now, I'm not sure they can synthesize a better bacteriophage than Mother Nature supplies from that perspective, but the concept itself, beyond bacteriophage, is very intriguing. So I kind of like to follow that company, see how they do. Do wish them success. But that was probably if I had to mention one most intriguing concept that I saw at the recent NIH meeting, that was probably it.
Sandro, thank you so much for spending the time with me today. Really appreciate it. Intralytics appears to be on the verge of great things when it comes to the fight against antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which of course have become a growing problem in our healthcare system. I wish you and your company the best of luck, and thank you for providing us with this insight.
My pleasure.